It's wonderful to welcome Scott Yenor of Boise State University once again to this podcast. I believe this is his third appearance on the program. Today we're speaking about the great country music legend, George Strait. Professor Yenor has written an essay on him titled Murder on Music Row at the latest issue of the Claremont Review of Books. Scott, welcome to the show once again. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me on. I'd love to talk about George Strait, so it'll be fun.
Yes. I believe in our previous email chat, you promised to wear a George Strait shirt, but I guess we missed that boat.
Sorry, I mean, I have one, but I couldn't bring it along today.
Okay. So, why George Strait? Why would you want to write about him?
Yeah, I mean, George Strait is receiving a great honor. President Trump is inaugurating him into the Kennedy Center Honors, and and he's the greatest country music singer of my lifetime. I mean, not the all-time greatest, but definitely the most popular and most influential of my lifetime. I was born in 1970. George Strait started hitting the charts, when I was still in before puberty, and now he's like still producing records and occasionally plays, but he's 74 years old, and it's time to acknowledge his greatness while he's still alive to appreciate it.
Certainly.
So I wanted to write an appreciation of him.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the music of Strait before reading the essay, so I'm trying to, be up to speed. Uh, what I do know is that I used to play a video game called, was it Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and one of the songs that was featured on that video game is All My Exes Live in Texas. It's one of the songs.
Yes, a classic from the early part of his career, and a fun divorce song, a rare, not a rare thing in country music. Actually, fun divorce songs like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I believe our in our first conversation we also touched upon country music, but from a female perspective. And yeah, I believe it was Tammy Wynette who wrote the famous divorce song, right? Which he spelled out the word
Yes.
Divorce.
Yeah, I mean it was the first article that I wrote for Claremont on country music was on the first ladies of country music and their understanding of sexual relations and what women should be like, what they should expect of men, and the problems that their expectations causes for relationships. And I did want to hit the men, and I do think that George Strait actually in his entire corpus offers a kind of a take on how the relations between men and women should go, what the ideal man is, and I framed the argument like that. So it's actually partly my interest in marriage and family life that leads me to country music, where this is one of the main themes. It's not the only theme; it's one of the main themes. And I did want to look at it from like both sides, both perspectives, and uh, and I think Strait is a great representative of that.
Hmm. Yeah. So how does George Strait treat divorce in his songs?
Yeah, so I divide Strait's like career into two parts, divided about in the mid 1990s when he actually did a movie called Pure Country, and I think that was the apex of his career. He had two albums in the early to mid 90s, Pure Country and Lead On, which I think are the best two. And he doesn't really write divorce songs until after in the second part of his career, and he usually treats it as a great tragedy. Um, the songs where he sings about this, one of them is called "Today My World Slipped Away," and the man is, and I think it depicts this very nicely. The maybe men do better financially after divorce. It's at least arguable, but they usually don't do as well psychologically. And he, depicts that in this song really nice. A man does a woman wrong in a song that was also in the late 90s called Give It Away. And the woman just says, like, give all the stuff away. I don't want anything in the settlement. I just want to get away from you, scumbag. And so that's another divorce song. The one that hits the weirdest note, and I didn't write about this in the article, is a song. One of his last number ones is from the mid 2000s. Um, The title is "She Let Herself Go," and this is a kind of gray divorce where the man leaves the wife and she ends up being better off, and she let herself go on a cruise into New York City into the spa, and she was having fun and it was great for her, and it just doesn't really like fit in with the whole corpus, I think, of Strait. And it doesn't really fit in with like the theme of divorce in country music generally. In the article, I treated that with silence.
Let's see.
But here I give you words. I give you words on it today.
Got it. Okay. So how would you distinguish the first half of George Strait's musical output and the second half, say for the movie Pure Country as the
Yeah, yeah. So I ran a regression on this, and we did some counting, and I might not get the numbers exactly right. I think there were I think he has like 45 or 44 number one hits that reached the Billboard country charts. And in the first part of his career, 25 of them, so 25 of them before 1994 or so. And almost all of them were heartbreak songs. That is, they were almost all about breaking up and not marriage, but maybe sometimes it was ambiguous whether it was a marriage or just a boyfriend girlfriend breaking up. But in the second half of his career, there's one breakup song. There's one heartbreaker, and so the first part of his career, tons of traditional arrangements with the theme of heartbreak and the stoical man, I would say, front and center in the songs. The second part of his career is lots of celebration of life well led, lots of songs about marital happiness, but and very few heartbreakers. Still traditional arrangements, but the themes of the song change. So it's almost like you had a young man who was looking for love, and he finds it, and that's how Pure Country, the movie, ends. And then the rest of his career is kind of within the cocoon, for the most part, within limits of this marital happiness, celebrating stability. So, I mean, I could take emblematic songs. There's a song in the first part of his career, Amarillo by Morning, which is just about a stoical man, and it's not clear that this man needs a woman at all. Like, he doesn't have much. He just travels around, but at least he's free. He celebrates the freedom that he has. And in the second part of his career, I would say like a characteristic song is this beautiful song, Check Yes or No, about a boy and a girl who went to school together, and then, they get married, and then they have an anniversary. So that's 3 verses with 3 periods of their life. And it all started when the boy asked the girl if he liked her and gave her, like, if you do, check yes or no in this box. And so, that's the theme of that song. So it's I think those are typical songs of each period of George Strait.
So the title of the essay, I suppose it's Claremont's responsibility to assign it. It's based on one of his more famous songs, which he did with Alan Jackson. And you treated the song a little bit. So which part of Strait's career does this song, Murder on Music Row, fit into?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it kind of sums up the career in many ways. I mean, we could talk about a little history here, I suppose, of country music, at least as I have come to understand it and have an interpretation of it. So take this for what it's worth from a person who listens to a lot of music and reads a lot about it, but these are my own theories. So it seems to me that there were 3 moments of peril for the genre of country music, which has always been distinct, somewhat regional, but the instrumentation is distinct. The themes are pretty distinct too. And one of them was in the late 1950s. It's a little known fact that Elvis Presley songs reached the top of the country charts at the same time they were reaching the top of the rock and roll charts. And that's interesting, right? Because the genres were entirely mixing, and there was a real effort to get country fans to embrace rock and roll music. So country stations would be playing Elvis. And people who had their roots in country music in the late 50s were seeing where the money was and were starting to move toward rock and roll. So even like great country legends who were just starting their careers at that time, like Conway Twitty, started to go a little rock. And in the late 50s, there was established the Country Music Association, which was designed basically to set standards for radio stations to play country music. And then a whole burgeoning industry that served stations that would play only country music arose. A whole sound called the Nashville Sound, whose main engineer was Owen Bradley, I think, arose in the 1960s, and it was just like a distinct country flavor. So it was saved, I would say, by an attempt by radio owners and visionaries, really, seeing that the genre was under threat from mixing, to save the industry. And so the CMAs have become an award for the country music stars. You'll have male CMA Singer of the Year, female Group of the Year, Song of the Year, blah, blah, blah. And so the 50s was one moment. And another moment was the 70s. And this was within the context of the CMA. And I would say that even some great country singers who I love and I celebrate, but the themes of the music were becoming extraordinarily mainstream. So that there were celebration, and the classic of this is someone whose albums I have and who I've really always loved a lot, Don Williams. But he just sang, it was kind of like wimpy men singing about how they really needed a woman, and if they didn't, they were going to cry. And their wife or their girlfriend was going to be their best friend. And he had 18 number one hits or something like that in the late 70s, but that was all the themes. There was even a rodeo song. This happened in the maybe early or mid 80s by a man named Dan Seals, where the wife leaves the husband and she joins the rodeo. And the husband is left to raise the girl. And it's just kind of like this whiny song about a guy who's been left by his wife. And oh no, it's so hard. And so I think there was a real revival. I call it neo-traditionalism in the article, in the 1980s, where there was a return to traditional instrumentation, banjos, steel guitars, fewer drums, but there's always been drums, even, I should say, at least from the late 50s on, and then traditional themes. And the people who spearheaded that was Strait, Alan Jackson, Randy Travis, and Keith Whitley. Keith Whitley drank himself to death in the late 80s, but was popular and an excellent neo-traditional artist. And there's some female examples of this too, but this article was on the males. I would also put Reba McEntire and the Judds in this category, I think. And so this was saved by personnel. After the moment of peril in the 70s, it was saved by personnel who just breathed life into the genre by returning to the themes that made it what it was in the 50s and 60s. And that was so what George Strait and the other guys from that generation did, but I think Strait is the definite leader of that group, is kind of reestablish themes and instrumentation. And we're kind of going through, it seems to me, a third crisis. And that is a total mixing of genres. I mean, I don't listen to it as much anymore because of the mixing of genres. And we'll see if, and it's difficult to imagine some sort of central authority solving the problem today that is reestablishing it, because the industry and the production of music is so fragmented. So you can find great traditional country music still. You can find it. And maybe it's easier to get today than it's ever been because you can get it free on Spotify when you kind of learn how to look for it. And but, that's not what gets played on the radio, but that's also not where the action is, it seems to me. So I don't know if there's a solution to the fragmentation of the industry today, but I think we're in that third crisis.
Okay. Yeah. So I'd love to do a deep dive on country music history at some point. So for the time being, I'll take your word for it. So tell me about the Murder on Music Row song. So what's it about, and why should we feel that is relevant?
Yeah, I mean, the the song is really about how I want to like go through the lyrics here, but I have to start at the beginning of the song in my mind here, and I'd have to be quiet for a second to start playing it. But uh, now I think it's meant seriously, though. I've seen Alan Jackson and George Strait kind of poo-poo the song occasionally, but the song is about the mixing of genres. Like Music Row is where traditional country music is established. It's where the Nashville sound of the late 50s and 60s was produced. It's where the great producers Chet Atkins and Owen Bradley worked. And so Music Row, all right, so they committed murder down on Music Row. It's never clear who they are in the song. But someone out of profit motive has decided that you're better off like mixing genres instead of playing traditional instruments with traditional themes. So Alan Jackson and George Strait in the song complain in various parts about the steel guitars no longer cry and the fiddles barely play. Is one line in the song, and they believe it is said that no one will buy those drinking and cheating songs, and so they've changed the genre, and and I think this really was happening in the 90s. Like the genre was going very much like, oh, I love my kids and I love my wife, and this is a music for that. And um, the traditional themes of heartbreak, which Strait himself dropped from his music in that period, were less emphasized. And so it's a complaint, generally, I would say the song is a complaint about the mixing of genres and the dropping of traditional themes and the dropping of traditional instrumentation and how they, whoever that is in the song, committed murder down on Music Row. And there was also something deeply true about this. Because a lot of these legends, the previous generation before George Strait and Alan Jackson, George Jones, Merle Haggard, these guys were still around. And George Jones was producing albums in the late 90s, and he could not get play on the radio. And this song like complains about that problem. And they can't they wouldn't let the possum on the radio. They wouldn't let the hag on the radio are part of the lyrics to the song. And this was like so spot on the nose of the reality for these guys, for Jones and Haggard. I don't think Jones hit the charts much in the 90s. He was nominated for a CMA award for Album of the Year in the like late 90s for his song Choices. They wouldn't even let him play it on the CMAs. Now, partly that's because he was so unreliable as a performer and sometimes showed up so drunk that they didn't want him to play or even put him on the stage. But so there was also these guys that is Strait and Jackson, sang about the legends of country music and how they had been left behind by the music industry in this song. So it's not just instrumentation and themes, it's also like the living legends of the genre who are still around and could not get played on the radio.
Mhm. Right. Just to quote some of the lyrics, which you've alluded to, I believe the chorus goes, "For the steel guitars no longer cry and the fiddles barely play, but drums and rock and roll guitars are mixed up in your face. Old Hank wouldn't have a chance on today's radio since they committed murder down on Music Row."
Yeah, and then other verses replace the old Hank with the hag and the
Yeah,
possum.
yeah. And I'm
So,
guessing
which
the possum refers to George Jones, right?
yes, it's George Jones. I can't remember. The what I've always been told is that he looked like a possum, but then I also heard it was there were other reasons for him being called that. But he always seemed to like be a handsome guy to me. But of course, I like possums too. So
Yeah. I think it. one of the reasons why I think people of my generation, as opposed to yours, do not gravitate to country music, well, I think there may have been sort of a resurgence lately with like Benson Boone and whomever. But one of the reasons is that you cannot really distinguish a country song from, say, a pop rock song, say for if you listen closely to the lyrics.
Yeah, no, I totally believe that. Yeah, I mean, recently I've been on a binge. Maybe I can recommend this binge to you.
Okay.
So, uh, so George Jones, as I just mentioned, I mean, he's the greatest country singer of all time. Like, and I think George Strait would say this. And he sang a song in the mid 1980s called "Who's Gonna Fill These Shoes." It's like who's gonna like carry on the country traditions. And I think there's an answer. It was Strait, it was Jackson, it was Travis, it was Whitley, it was Reba, and others. But really, after that song, it was very difficult for George Jones to get on the radio. And he tried hard. Like, he did all of the gimmicks to get on the radio. And, but by the end of it, he realized they're not going to play my stuff no matter what. And he made some banger albums. Incredible production value on the albums. Billy Sherrill was the producer, a legendary producer of songs. And they had top shelf talent writing the songs, and Jones sang them like unbelievably. They never made it on the radio. And so if you want to like hear the production value of modernity meeting the highest quality voice and lyrics with country themes, like the last albums of George Strait, not George Strait, George Jones, Cold Hard Truth, um, The Walls Came Down, or something like that. I mean, I could give you the list. But they're just like if you're interested in like what the genre at its apex sounds like, it's kind of like these songs. I would also recommend the George Strait albums that I mentioned before, "A Pure Country" and "Lead On." And the kind of wonderful thing is, if you've been turned off of country music, that means everything is a discovery. So instead of looking forward to like new releases, you can work backwards and listen to the history, because the recording quality is pretty high, starting in the late 50s, I would say, and gets amazingly high in the 70s, and where you still have very skilled people, instrument players. And I think it takes a lot more skill to play the steel guitar and the fiddle and the banjo than it does to play an electric guitar. And so I think it's just very high quality music. So those would be two things I would say, like listen to it at its peak, and then recognize that there's a whole history where it was a distinct genre that is like room for discovery. And I'm 54 years old, and I still go back and listen to and find new things like B-side of 45s and things like that to listen to, songs that I never heard of, and they awaken something in me. So
Yeah.
that's my
So
inspiring speech for you. We'll see if it works.
yeah, yeah, I'll definitely dive deeper into the old country music sound after this. So what does Straits' songs teach his listeners about being a good man?
Yeah. Here I think Strait is appropriately old fashioned. Um, I think that his baseline man is stoical. That is, he accepts what he can't change, and then makes the best of his situation. And he's not overly emotional or sensitive. He like will be quiet. Strait as a performer plays his songs, but doesn't banter with the audience. He looks like he's having a good time. He doesn't like try to inspire you or tell you he's inspiring you. He plays his music, and is a private man. Doesn't make his private life public, and his songs kind of reflect that. It's kind of stoicism that is the baseline for him. Amarillo by Morning is one of the songs about that, and there are others. But he also sings about the problem of the stoic man. Like, he doesn't know what he can't change. And that's one of the problems with Stoicism. Like, it's one thing to say you accept what you can't change, but it's another thing to say you know what you really can't change. And so the Stoic man often in his songs, like there's heartbreak, he doesn't think there's much he can do about it. Sometimes he just accepts it. And my favorite song in this genre is I Can Still Make Cheyenne, where this guy who plays in a rodeo calls up his girlfriend after he doesn't make the finals. And she says, don't bother coming home. By the time you get here, I'll be long gone. Uh, there's somebody new, and he sure ain't no rodeo man. And then he says back to her, I'm sorry it's come down to this. There's so much about you I'm going to miss. But I got to go now, baby. If I hurry, I can still make Cheyenne. This is the kind of guy who isn't like overly problem. It's not a big problem that he's been dumped by this woman. He likes her, but he doesn't overly fret, and he just rejoins the rodeo. Now, that's a problem, but it still, like, I think forms the baseline for self-controlled, like, not overly sensitive male honor being like what men should be about. And then Strait just puts guys like, all right, do you need love? And stoical guys know they need love. Sometimes they tell themselves lies that they don't, but those lies are put to the test, and the men end up unhappy. And so that's, I think, in his songs, especially in that first part of his career, the theme: how to combine stoical reserve and love, or how to combine love and appropriate male pride. So he never grovels. He never overly praises his woman. He recognizes that men have problems, but he also recognizes that women cause problems. And he like struggles through all of these realities. So baseline, stoical, deserving of honor and respect, in need of love. Right? Those are the elements of the male that I think comes forth especially in the first part of his career.
So you've alluded to this before, but I wonder, was there a change also in how the male in country music being depicted, following the genre or sound mixing that Strait and Jackson lamented about in Murder on Music Row?
So you mean, like, are they reacting against a particular vision of
Or
of
was there like a new vision of manliness or manhood being, prescribed in like the country music that came after him?
Yeah, I think it's much more domesticated, much more entire identity encapsulated in family life and love for your wife. Straight's not opposed to these things, but they have a place in the good life for the man. I mean, I don't want to pick on anyone in particular, but since we're here, there's a song by a country singer from the late 90s, Don't Laugh at Me, which is just all about being increasingly sensitive to the weirdness of everyone around you. So by weirdness, I don't, that's not the right word, but like, if there's someone who is a little fatter than everyone else, don't laugh at him. If there's someone who is depressed, don't laugh at him. And it's just like, be sensitive to everything around you. That's what the ideal man should be. And in other words, nothing having to do with stoicism or keeping it to yourself or encouraging other people to just suck it up and try to make the best of their lives. And so that song, like, it's the low point or high point, depending on what your view of the sensitive man is. But it's, I think, what like George Strait's early songs were reacting against. It was prominent in the 70s. And it is what ended up displacing the stoical, honorable man in the country genre, like sometime in the late 90s, 2000s. I know I was still listening pretty religiously until about 2010 to new music, and then I just said, no, I got to go back and learn more of the history. So my history ends in 2010 or so.
Yeah. I remember a long time ago I read the book Manliness by Harvey Mansfield,
Yes.
which I think discusses the same issues that you raised too, like the uh, I guess the assertive versus the sensitive male models, and which one contemporary society now favors. So obviously, the latter
Yeah,
model.
I mean, it makes sense that music is going to be more about love, and but it's a question of which baseline are you setting for it. And Strait's, especially that first part of his career, set the I would call it the stoical baseline. Um, and whereas the tendency in American culture now is really to set the sensitivity baseline. And uh, and so yes, I mean I don't know that I stole anything from Harvey on this, but I definitely have read that book a couple times and have learned a lot from it.
Yeah. Well, I guess it provides us with all the more reason to listen to country music, especially those of my age, because yeah, unless unless you're living under a rock, there is a crisis in masculinity, right? You have like scores of males who are miseducated on how to treat women, and you know when it doesn't work for them, the playbook doesn't work for them, they go straight into the so-called red pill mode, where they would present anything that is relating anyway to treating women nicely.
Yeah, and I do think that that Strait and the best of country music is a kind of antidote for the red pill. That it's interesting that you bring that up. That is one of my secret motivations for
Ooh.
writing the piece, because because Strait does two things. Like he gives you an image of male greatness, and it's as I say, traditional stoical image of greatness. And but that doesn't mean that you don't need a woman, and or you don't need love in your life. Well, it could be either way, but I think I prefer the first way. Like you may need a woman, and she's going to be part of your life, not your whole life. Like that's the red pill community is reacting against this idea of manliness that is entirely captured by domestic life, and changes male identity to be contained within domestic life. And like being a middle manager is the highest you can aspire to. And you are a servant to the desires of everyone around you, and a servant to their whims. And so there's that's at least part of what they're reacting against, and it's very reasonable to react against it. Strait rejects it too in the music, but he doesn't go crazy. He doesn't go crazy, and he offers this alternative vision where there's a virtue outside of domestic life that is lawful, but and I should say not contained within the family, but still may need it. So so I think his reaction to that, I mean, this is a little ahistorical to say that, but like his argument that you can construct against what red pill people would say is, obvious, and takes into account a lot of their objections.
Yeah, it reminds me of a book that was in the 1950s called The Organization Man.
Mm-hmm.
William H. White is the author, and it was a huge phenomenon because it paints a picture of everything works out for everybody, but nobody, especially the men, is content with it.
Yeah, so you have to give an account of what the Germans call Wanderlust. You have to give an account of that. And that's what Amarillo by Morning, and that's what the rodeo means. That's what the cowboy songs mean. Even later on in the second part of his career, "Carrying Your Love with Me" is a song which I think is also named for an album, where like he's traveling, he's doing great things, but he's carrying, like carries the woman's love with him like it's in a briefcase, and he goes to West Virginia down to Tennessee. I'm just going through the lyrics in my mind, and so so yeah. It's a reaction against people who think the entire identity is contained within organizational or middle management, or however you want to look at it. And so the cowboy songs are important, in this way. Strait like picks up what earlier country singers, Waylon Jennings, the Outlaws, Johnny Cash, Marty Robbins, they sang about the Old West. They sang about being outlaws. They sang about forbidden biker gangs. Charlie Daniels goes in this category too. And then George Strait actually sings songs a little bit like that in the same genre. That's what Amarillo by Morning, probably his signature song, fits in with that. And it's just like the man can't be contained within civilization and the family. And I think probably out of all the genres, country music like has the most responsible and beautiful account of that. It's not like rock and roll, which at least in my time was about partying and having sex with lots of people. Like that's what the alternative vision of manliness is. Now that's just like that's decadence. It's not responsible manliness. And country music has these visions.
So, what parts of Straits' songs that serves as, I suppose, an alternative to both, the conformity aspects of, say, living in civilization versus, being totally outside of civilization and act in a rather barbaric manner, say, as in the rock and roll music?
Yeah, I mean those are the ones that I just mentioned. So Amarillo by Morning, Up from San Antone. The only thing that I got is the only thing that I have is all that I got on. Uh, I ain't got a dime, but what I got is mine. I ain't rich, but Lord, I'm free. Amarillo by morning. Amarillo's where I'll be. Not a big city. Um, he's going to Amarillo. And then the other one is the rodeo song that I mentioned before. There's also trucking songs that he sings. They didn't hit number one, so they're not accounted for in the article. I just talked about his number one songs in the article, um, and, uh, and so that's another genre of songs that kind of fits in with the outlaw songs that was big in the '70s. And Strait continues that. The name of the great song, it's one of his fastest song, Clackety Clack on the Railroad Track, but I can't, I'm going through the lyrics to get to the title, but I'm just going to keep talking instead of sitting here trying to think of the title. And so, yeah, I mean, I think those are the ones. I mean, he's not Natty Bumppo from James Fenimore Cooper. I mean, he's not outside of civilization over much. It's the cowboy songs that do it. His closing song is "This Is When the Cowboy Rides Away." He, I think, ends all of his shows with that, and at least most of them that I've seen. And that's another song that does it. Like I can leave civilization, I can ride away, and also never reached number one, I think, but is a staple song of his. So the cowboy is the alternative that you see in George Strait songs to the civilized man.
Mhm. Yeah. Tell us a bit about how distinctively American country music is. Because in my view, I've listened to, a lot of music, at least, you know, yeah, my fair share of it. And I realized that of all the existing musical genres, I don't believe that country has ever been replicated in other cultures. You definitely have European rock bands and, East Asian Indian jazz music, but no European country music and definitely no East Asian country music. It's distinctively American. There are Canadians too, but I think I consider Anglo-Canadians and Americans to be roughly of the same cultural mold.
Yeah, I think it is a distinct American genre of music, and not only that, but it's very regional, at least in its origin, though it has gone nationwide. I mean, in the beginning of country music, before there were big Nashville labels, everything was independent, very regional, um, so that there would be regions within states that would have their own country music bands that would tour around, and their own, kind of record producing uh, enterprises. That is, they would have their own bands, they'd make records, they'd be played on their own local radio stations, and the word cover, like when you we used to say remake in the 1980s, but I've learned that you should say cover. Is really, it comes from when national labels would find a song that's being sung in some region in Texas, and then they would cover it up by releasing from a famous national singer this regional song that hadn't been copyrighted. So they would just like make lots of money. They would cover it, and then the independent regional record enterprise would receive nothing. And so it's just like they covered it, they smothered it with a pillow, and so yeah, I mean, it's a regional, and then became like by which I mean like very local version, and then it became regional, that is very southern. But once the Grand Ole Opry went national, which is in the mid '50s, it became a national genre, and there's a little less twang in the singing after that. That is, in the vocals of the singers. And drums were added at that point. It used to be that people would just use basses to do what drums do in country music, but drums were added, also in the late 50s. First Light, I think the first drum was on the Grand Ole Opry in 1958 or something like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else I can say about it. It's distinctly American. It's not professionals who do it. It's people who just kind of really love the music and learned it from their pappy, and or didn't learn it from their pappy. It's handed down in that way. And I don't know that the instruments are distinctly American, because the mandolin comes from Great Britain, and obviously the violin comes from Europe. What's a fiddle? It's been a mystery to me. What's a fiddle? What Loretta Lynn said about this was, well, one violin is a violin. Lots of violins is a fiddle. And so I like that as an American definition.
Yes. I would be remiss if, I didn't mention the fact that last year, like a very unexpected country song, made its way onto number one in the Billboard Hot 100, and that is the Oliver Anthony song. Oh my
Rich
God,
man from
I was
Richmond.
blanking on the title, but
Yeah,
the,
rich man from Richmond.
yes. Okay, thank you very
A rich
much.
man north of Richmond.
Yeah, Richmond, north of Richmond. And it's truly unexpected. Like, people were treating it as an entirely new thing, but I think Anthony was just following that tradition, which you have illustrated.
100%. And the tradition, and this is what I mean by the fragmentation of the industry, is now just open to people who you don't need a big record deal to make traditional country music. You can make traditional country music and then release it and see what happens on Spotify. And the Richmond north of Richmond is a really good example of that. Very traditional music. I mean, a little angrier than I would say most country music is, though there is country music that's angry and that expresses anger and outrage. The classic example of that is the great Charlie Daniels, who has many songs critiquing America in the 1970s that are just to die for. And Simple Man maybe being the best of them. But so there is, anger has always been kind of like the protest music of rock. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and 10 Soldiers and Nixon's Coming. Ohio is the name of that song. Like, it just starts out with an angry guitar. But regardless, like, country music is generally more hopeful or forlorn and not angry. But there's a place for it in the genre. And it was a great song, and it expressed something deep within, I would say, rural America. Um, uh, there's a song that has been, I don't know, done by a lot of country musicians before, from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The theme of which is like, uh, rich people are never content. Like, you're better off being poor, and so it totally fits within that genre.
Mhm. So, finally, why should Americans listen to country music, especially those who have never listened to it before?
Yeah, I think it's the music that tutors the passions the best. How's that? Like, I do think that virtue is not ignored in country music. In fact, it's a centerpiece of what the genre is about. Sometimes the virtue is overly domestic. Um, Sometimes maybe there's too much celebrating of lawlessness or the outlaw or something like that. But it tutors the passions and responds to the human desire to escape the everyday and the mundane. It speaks to the wanderlust that people will have in organizations, and is the great music of the heart. It takes the heart seriously, both its aspirations and its forlornness. So I still think like the history of the genre is something that, if you listen to it, you'd get a good musical education. Your soul would be, as Plato would say, rightly shaped by country music more than any other genre that is American or prevalent and digestible, I would say, in today's music. I might prefer Bach to George Strait, but I think that George Strait is more likely to speak to people than Bach.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you very much, Scott Yenor, for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.